Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, worship team. Good morning, everybody. Glad you're here. We are in week 2 of our series called Starting Over. And this week we're talking about regrets. Anybody ever have any? That would be everybody. So some regrets we know are sad and you're still carrying that with you today. Some you laugh over and tell stories about. So I thought I'd start out just sharing with you a couple of my regrets that I have. One started, I was about 11 years old, and my mom, I was a towhead. Everybody knows what a towhead is. So I was just almost white, just blonde. Look at Jackie, and that's even more. So, and my mom thought it was really cute. I had this straight right across the forehead haircut, right? And then it went down like this. Well, at this time, I don't know if most of you don't even remember this, but it became cool to part your hair down the middle, right? And then they flared out. That's back in the days when I had something to flare. And it flared out. But my mom wasn't ready for me to make that transition into coolness. And so after I left the house one morning, as I started junior high school, I took the scissors, and I thought the way to get that part down the middle was to cut your hair like this and like this. And then it would comb back, and it would be really cool. It's just a good thing my dad was out of town, because he would have made me keep that just to prove me a lesson. So that was a regret. I have other regrets. I regret all the cars that I had in my late teens, and I regret it because I never purchased any of them, which is why I went away for a couple of years to ever think about those choices I made. On Kauai, lived there. It was about 20 years ago, and had an opportunity we were ready. We could have bought this house in a place called Puakea, and I didn't make the purchase because I thought it was just too much for a 3-bedroom house in that area. They were asking $4.25 for it. I thought, no, they'll come down on that for sure. Didn't buy it, lost the chance. Now it sells for $1.5 million. Regret. And this last one, it's not really a regret, but it is a source of pain. And honey, would you stand up? Go ahead, babe. Yeah, do you see what she's doing right there? See what she's sporting right there? You pray for us, because we're about to have a volatile afternoon at the Randolph house. We've already set ground rules. So I don't know, either Cowboys wins or I do a lot of drinking today. No, I'm kidding. So regrets are a part of our lives, and we all have them. There's fun ones or things that we just laugh at, but there's also ones that have rocked our world. And in fact, there's a website. It's called secretregrets.com. It's a legit, true website where people will go. It's kind of cathartic. Well, they'll unleash and post regrets that they have. They maybe don't have those kind of close relationships, which are sad, where you can't do that with somebody. And so they post them there and find some solace. So that's a good thing. But here's a few that I've read on there. One, my biggest regret, one that plagues me in my waking moments and some sleeping moments, is that when I was given the opportunity to go to USC for screenwriting, I didn't take that chance. Another regret. My regret is coming to the mutual decision to have an abortion. My fiance has taken time alone to think and work through some things, and I haven't hardly seen or heard from her since. I regret, this last one, my entire life. If I could start all over again, I would. I've grown into a bitter, lonely person. I made countless mistakes. Pardon me. I haven't accomplished much, and I've completely lost hope. So these are heart-wrenching. These are the ones where people get stuck in them, and they have affected their lives. And this is why we're doing this series, because folks with unhealed and regrets that haven't come under the cross yet and the power of Christ yet causes people to get stuck. And so this whole Starting Over series, pardon me, is about getting unstuck and moving into living. Because our regrets from our past, we know this. While they're strong, even if they're pushed down, they do not have to define our future. They're not intended to define our future. God will actually not only forgive or whatever, he'll redeem those things and bring it to where we can actually have a voice out of our pain. And that's a wonderful, beautiful thing about God. So we're going to look at 3 categories of regrets as we start off this morning, because they bring up different emotions of how this regret happened. The number 1 category and types of regrets are regrets of action. Now, these are the regrets that we kind of, smack our forehead and we're just upset at ourselves that we did what we did, the lies that we told, or the relationship that we torpedoed, or the rage that we unleashed on that person, or the words that we spoke, or whatever we did. We did this action to this person in this situation. We regret what we did. There's no taking it back. And those are regrets of action. They make up the largest portion of the regrets that we have, things that we did. Here's another one. Regrets of inaction. You can write that down. Regrets of inaction, very simply, are those things that we wish we would have done that we didn't. We regret not sharing our love. We regret not sending that letter. We regret not taking a chance on that relationship with that good person. There's a little poem, I'm sure you've heard it before, and it expresses regrets of inaction. It says, "For all sad words of tongue and pen, the saddest of these, it might have been," right? So those are regrets of inaction. Gosh, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have told them how I feel. But then there's a third category. Most people, when they think of regrets, they think of that. What I did that I wish I wouldn't have done, or what I didn't do that I wish I would have. But there's a third category, and this category goes deep. This one dwells deep. And this is regrets of reaction. This came from the abuse that we suffered. This came from the illness that we had, or the injury, or the sickness, or the accident, or the rejection that we felt, the betrayal that we experienced. This is something that was done to us. And this kind of regret here, this is the one that affects people at the deepest level and can, unchecked, unhealed, really create a cycle in somebody's life where more of the same gets produced. I want to introduce you to a friend of ours called Jacqueline, and this is just a part of her story on how this happened.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline, and this is my starting over story. My mother migrated from Guatemala to the United States, and I was born in Boston. When I was 2, we moved to Chicago after my parents had separated. My mom was pretty much the entryway to all our family from Guatemala to migrate to the United States. So we never had a home where it was just a mom and dad and the kids. It was cousins, aunts, uncles, and so on, and neighbors from back home. Because of that, there was access to a lot of abuse for a child, and physically or emotionally and sexually. I kind of found myself in a sexual abuse situation from about 4 to about 12. At the age of 12, I told my mom, what had happened. I don't believe that she didn't believe me. I believe that she didn't want to believe me. And so, not growing up with my father, I think that's what made me gravitate to certain people that were not good for me, and that just set me up to have a failed relationship after a failed relationship after another failed relationship, because I was always searching for that fatherly love. For me, it wasn't like, why did you leave my mother? It was, why didn't you protect me, when I was a child? The reason that all kind of came to light is because I had started a relationship with a man, and that's where it all came back, and I had to tell this man, and I was 12, that he wasn't the first one to touch me in the way that was happening. And so this man was 8 years older than me. And at the time, I decided to start a relationship with this man that was 8 years older than me, who became the father of my child. I was 16 when I got pregnant. I was 17 when I had him. 3 months later, after he was born, I left this man when I turned 18. Still dealing with the anger and still dealing with the self-destruction, because I was still doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, but I was still very present in parenting. Go to work, come home, be the single mom, put him to bed, and then go out at night. And then come back home before Devon woke up, And so that was kind of like my routine from like Thursday to Sunday. Growing up as a child, we knew about God and we heard about God. I kind of knew, you have the notion that there is a higher being, but there is no relationship, there's no example or anyone really teaching that to me.
So we're going to hear a little bit more from Jacqueline's story in a few minutes. But did you notice how her original pain led to more pain, which led to more pain? And that is often the case. So I want to introduce you to a term that we've borrowed from the book that we've kind of based this series on here in talking about this. And it's called a sorry cycle. And this is what happens, is that divorce or that abuse or that bankruptcy or that loss or that tragedy or whatever it is, that thing that happens, and there's an immediate regret, but also what comes with that, when we feel that pain of what it is that we did, there comes a longing to somehow feel that pain, to give us a different feeling than the one that we have. And all too often, we do that in unhealthy ways. And we self-medicate, or we for sex outside of marriage, or do different things, relationships, drug, whatever that is. We because of the regret, we have this longing, and because of this longing, we medicate ourselves and do this to fill that, but then we regret that we did that, and it brings us back to this, and then we long to get out of it and fill that void that we're feeling and do something that we regret. And this can go on and on and on and just cycle around. We get stuck in it. Psychologists have a name for this when somebody's in this vicious cycle that just keeps going on, and it's rumination, where we just continue to think about it. We get fixated over our regrets, over what we did, follow the same trail, even though it's dysfunctional, even though we know it hasn't paid off or really helped other than momentary, fix, even though we know that, we still do that because, well, at least we understand it. We get it. So we know we can do that. Even though we know it's broken, it's not a real fix, because there's this longing for something to take away the pain and regret. But then we do that and we go back, and back. One psychologist put it this way: regret can have damaging effects on mind and body. When regret turns into rumination and self-blame, it keeps us from fully engaging in life. You ever been there? Yeah, maybe you're there today. Maybe you have that thing. That's what this series is all about. It's saying, let's get free from that cycle. And it's not just by trying harder. For Pete's sake, we know how that goes. It's by allowing us to come into relationship and contact with the power of God, the love of God that really does break it. And we're going to watch. I want to show you a couple different passages from the life of somebody who was a great friend of Jesus's, Peter, one of his disciples, and how he dealt with Peter getting him out of this thing. And if we apply these truths, I promise you, this could be a time in your life right now, this month, today, where we get unstuck from this and move forward. So let's look at this. Here's the big question. What regrets do you still carry with you? And I want you to think about that. Don't just push that down. Just say, oh, no, it's dealt with. I mean, there's some things in my life that I thought, oh, no, I dealt with that. And I really didn't. I just kind of pushed them down and cowboyed up. What are some regrets in your life that you still carry with you? God is going to help you start over. So, first story, as we look at Peter, we find that Jesus had this communion. In fact, we're going to celebrate communion here in a few minutes. He had communion. It was the first time he instituted communion. It was called the Last Supper, and he's in a room with his best friends, his guys, his disciples. And he's sharing the meal with them, and he says to them, he says, hey, one of you is going to betray me tonight. And they're all going around, is it I? Is it me? Is this? And Peter speaks up and he says, I don't know about these guys, but I ain't never going to betray you. I'll die for you. I will never leave you. You're my Jesus. So they end the meal, they go away. Jesus knows what's going to happen to him that night. He knows he's going to be handed over to Roman soldiers and he's going to ultimately be crucified. So before that happens, he goes to the garden, Gethsemane, and he goes to the garden to pray. In fact, he brings his disciples with him. Do you remember the story? You can read about it in the Gospel of John, Mark. And he gets there and he gets to the garden. He says, all right, you guys stay here. I'm going to go a little bit further. I just need to be alone with my Father. And so he's praying, and he's praying such fervent prayers. And he's asking God, God, take this cup from me. I don't want to do it. And it wasn't the cross he feared. It was that the Father was going to have to turn from him in that moment because Jesus was going to become the sin of the world and be punished as it. Jesus had never been separated from the Father. And he was agonizing over this. And yet he prayed, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. So he's having this, heart-wrenching time. And he goes back to his guys, probably ready to say, hey, guys, thank you for praying with me. And what's he find them? Asleep. Now, I know none of you can relate to that. Where we say, here I am, God, I've got it. I'm gonna fast, I'm gonna pray, I'm gonna do that. And I always say the sure way to cure insomnia is lay in your bed and pray. You're gonna fall asleep. So he finds these guys there, and then Jesus gets turned over to the Romans, and he's led from the garden back to this Roman courtyard where he is beat beyond recognition, beat, mocked, ridiculed, a crown of thorns placed on his head. And while he's there, Peter, not going with him, but followed at a safe distance just to watch what was going on. And he ended up in the courtyard too by a fire, warming himself. And Jesus was over there in the corner, had just been humiliated and beaten. And Peter's freaking out. He is. He doesn't know what's going on. And one of these bystanders says, hey, I know you. You're one of his disciples. And Peter says, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Well, sure, your speech gives it away. You're one of his. And he's like, I am not one of his. And then one more person says, hey, you're that guy. You're one of his. And it says that Peter actually cursed. I don't know him. And totally betrayed. And at that moment, the rooster crowed. And Peter's eyes across the courtyard met Jesus's. In fact, it says, and I'll read it to you what happened right here. It says, the Lord turned towards Peter. Their eyes met. Peter remembered Jesus' words about his triple denial before the rooster would crow. And so he left the courtyard and wept bitter tears. Peter is overcome with regret. Overcome with regret. He did what he said he would never do. And he walks away from his faith because he's going to get into this cycle, this sorry cycle. He could walk away from his faith. He could be thinking, I'm not worthy. I was one of his guys, and I did this. And say, forget it. What have I got to offer? I guess the proof is in the pudding. Look at the kind of person I am. Forget it and go down this route where he would be lost in the greatest regret of his life. But God, my two favorite words, because he comes in to those things. But God. Jesus is not willing for his boy to go down that path. He knows what he did. But he's not willing. He wants to break that thing before it becomes a way of life for him. And so, here's what happens. Jesus is crucified. He's resurrected from the dead. Peter, at this time, he says, I'm going back fishing. And many people, when they just read that, they think, okay, you're just going to go on a boat and cast a line in the water and, spend some time doing some fishing. Nothing wrong with that. That's not what that phrase means if you read it in the Greek. What it means is, I'm going back to my life of fishing. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know why I did this. I don't know what to do or to make sense of this or who I am. But one thing I do know is I'm not worthy to be one of his disciples. I'm not worthy to be a part of this thing. My God, what I did when he needed me most. I'm going back to the only life I know. At least it's predictable. At least I know that. It's not the best. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm going back to. Fishing. And so he does that. He's in the cove in Galilee. And he's fishing with the other disciples. And then they look towards the shore and they see Jesus. And Jesus has got a campfire on the shore. See, this is one of the reasons I love him so much. It doesn't matter how many times I read this passage. I'm like, this is my Jesus. He knows he's got to deal with his boys, especially Peter. What's he do? He doesn't get them around a table or around a desk. He does a bonfire on the beach. I kid you not. That's what he does. This is God. And he has a fire on the beach. And he's cooking breakfast for them. They see him. they start paddling in. Peter can't even wait for the boat to get in. He jumps out of the boat and starts swimming into shore. He swims into shore, he comes there, and he meets up with Jesus right there. And then, look at the verse 15, John 21. They finished eating breakfast. Jesus says, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these other things? Simon Peter, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus, take care of my lambs. When you read that, you're going to see he asked him that question 3 times, which I believe is absolute correlation to the 3 times that Peter denied him, to say, we're going to fix this thing. Jesus didn't come around. He wasn't trying to get Peter to remember what he did, or I told you so, or how could you, or come on, man, or whatever it was. You got to do better. I mean, I'm counting on you. You're going to be the head of the church, You're going to do, you can't make mistakes like that anymore. Come on, you know better. Think about all the good things I did. None of that. He cooks breakfast for him and says, Peter, do you love me? Which is, there's a profound implication there of this truth. Because I love you. Because I love you. Peter, do you love me? I'm still with you. I'm still there for you. Write this down. This is in Peter's regret and in ours. Jesus confirms the relationship. He confirms the relationship. He didn't rehash the story, but he didn't ignore it either. He didn't ignore that it happened, but he's like, you don't live defined or trapped by that regret. If we did, everyone in this room and everyone outside of this room would be trapped. We are called to be free from it, not to deny that it happened, but to recognize it and say, now what do I do with it? If I don't handle this regret in a healthy way, it's going to go to longing, which is I'm going to do something I regret. It's going to come back. Whether it's every 3 months or every 3 years, it's going to do this cycle. Jesus wanted Peter to know no matter what has happened, regardless of what has happened, you need to know this. You're my boy. I love you. I love you. What you did didn't affect that. My love is unconditional. Our relationship, Peter, I know. Our relationship, it's good. It's good. We're solid. I love you. I love you. In fact, Peter couldn't even say, I agape you. He said, I phileo you. Agape is a word for love that means, I unconditionally love you. He didn't bother saying that anymore. He knew. He said, I phileo. I have affection for you. Jesus said, I always knew that. It's okay. I love you right where you're at. And loving you right where you're at is going to enable you to get where you're potentially able to get. But you can't fake it. You get to be where you're at. I'm there with you. We're okay. Now let's walk together. Let's walk together out of this regret. This is what I want you to know about your regrets. You are loved by God right where you're at. Not when you fix it. Right now you are. And that is empowering because there's this next thing that happens. That's right. It happens to everybody once in a lifetime. I'm kidding. Here's the next thing. Write this down in your outline. You ready? It says this. Then Jesus does this. It says, Jesus confirms his purpose. Because after each affirmation of I love you and do you love me, this whole dialogue going on, what's he say? Feed my sheep. And Peter knew what this meant. Jesus was inviting him, not just I love you, he's inviting him back into the mission. Put that old thing away. You're not going back there anymore. You didn't disqualify yourself. You experienced humanity. You did something you regret doing. Something happened to you regret. This is part of being a human being. Now, that doesn't disqualify you, Peter. I want you to feed my sheep. Get back to the mission of God in this earth, of telling people, I have things for you. You need to know I love you, and you're still a part of the mission that I'm establishing here on the earth. This was Peter who would preach the gospel, and he'd be able to do it from a place of tenderness. The books of 1 Peter, 2 Peter are the most tender books in the New Testament. Why? Because he knew what he was capable of outside of the grace of God. How dare he stand in judgment of somebody else? He knew what was inside of him. He was able to bring compassion to others because of the things that he experienced. And that's the same promise for us today, is that those things that we regret that we did or didn't do or were done to us, scar as they might, legitimate as they are, they can still be redeemed. They do not have to manage our souls or our minds. They can be redeemed, and out of that hurt can come hope for other people as well as for ourselves. So this is what God does. He restores. And this is what that lady Jacqueline discovered when she finally did meet Jesus Christ. I want you to see the rest of her story right now.
During that time, I met a man who gave me a chance, and that was the beginning of a career change, a lifestyle change. I started caring more about my job and my son and my well-being than the partying, the drugs, and the alcohol. My oldest sister, her name is Shenny. She goes to work one Wednesday evening and suffers a brain aneurysm rupture. And by Friday, she was declared brain dead. And so that was the biggest earthquake of my life. I had lost my best friend, my cheerleader. So that rocked me. And I didn't know how to deal with this but to suppress it, just to ignore it. 8 months later, I have a mental breakdown and I decide I'm done. And so I attempt suicide January. 2 days later, after I come out, my nephew Steve collapses at work. He needed a new kidney. And so when I learned about the living donor, I put my name on the list. He needed a second chance at life, and I think I needed a second chance at life, a purpose. And so I think God uses this to give me my second chance. I called my mom and I said, Mom, I gotta go to church. And so I go to church that Friday and I asked for prayer. I was very scared, I was terrified. And so I asked God into my life and I told him, I asked Jesus, if you are real, if God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit is all real, then give me this. Give me him healthy, me healthy, and that we're gonna walk out of this operation on Monday together. I told him, I will be yours. I will give my life to you. I will serve you. So you make me useful. And we walked out on Monday. After the surgery and seeing that he did come through for me, I said, okay, well, this is serious. So I started learning, and I just dug myself into scripture. That started a journey of healing for me. Every day is an opportunity for me to start over. Every day I still mess up. Every day I can probably still go back to think about those things. It's not over, but I have a choice to start over every day, every morning.
She said, every day I have a choice to start over. Every day. I love that. I love that. Today you have a day. You have a choice to start over. So it's been a lot of years. Today's a brand new day. It really is. To bring that, not to hide from it, not to live in shame over it. It is what it is. What's done is done, whether you did, didn't do, or done to you. Not making light of that. It's serious, real stuff. But today you have an opportunity to take advantage of what Christ came here for, which certainly wasn't to start a religious movement. It was to set human hearts free and to bring us back into an unbridled, unfettered love and relationship with him where there is hope and there's freedom and there's newness and there's no condemnation and we get to move in that. That's the gospel message. That's the message we want to share with people. Not stop doing this and start doing this. That's her story, and it's going to continue in her life. But I have hopes for her that it won't be that sorry cycle of regret, longing, but something new, something freeing. And that's our hope for you too. The last words that Jesus spoke to Peter in this dialogue that he had was, follow me. Come on now. Let's do this. No, don't stay in that. Make today different. Peter, let's go. I got some exciting things for you. You have no idea. Right on the heels of Peter's worst moment, Jesus said, I'm going to commission you into some great things. Come on, let's do this. Isn't that great about our God? He doesn't say, prove your best. Let me see your best, and then I'll decide whether or not you're worthy. He goes, no, just understand, in your weakness, I'm made strong. My power is made perfect in weakness. I love that about God. We're going to celebrate communion this morning together. And we always have it available up here for people to take communion, but we're going to celebrate it together. And so the worship team's going to come back up, and we're going to have one more song. And while they do, are playing, just feel free to come on up and grab the elements. There's in the back, there's some, and then there's 2 tables in the back, and there's 2 tables up front. And so do that. And then there's also a napkin. So if you take the bread and you dip it in the juice, if it drips, have a napkin there. And hold on to that at your seat, and then we'll take it together in just a few minutes, okay? So go ahead and let's do that right now. Thank you, team.